Hey Reddit, this is a throwaway because some of the people involved know my main account. I'm a 29-year-old guy, and I've been living in my own house for quite a while. A couple of years ago, my mom, who's 53, lost her house. The details aren't really important, but since she had nowhere to go, I let her move in with me. I work in tech and make enough money that supporting both of us wasn't a problem. The plan was for Mom to stay temporarily until she got back on her feet. Of course, temporary has a funny way of becoming permanent. About a year ago, Mom started dating a guy I'll call R. He was 47, divorced, and had 2 kids, a 14-year-old daughter and a 12-year-old son. At first, he seemed like a decent guy. Mom and her got serious pretty quickly, and then the pandemic hit. R's lease was ending. Co-parenting was becoming difficult, and everything was shutting down. One night at dinner, Mom suggested that R and his kids move in with us until things settled down. At the time, I honestly didn't see a problem with it. I knew R well enough to know he wasn't a jerk. His kids were polite and shy, and after a few movie nights and shared dinners, they started getting more comfortable around me. My house isn't a mansion, but has 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and a backyard. I took the master bedroom. Mom kept her room, and R and his kids shared the 3rd bedroom. We worked out a basic schedule for chores, cooking, and other household responsibilities. For the first few weeks, everything went surprisingly well. Our help around the house, cooked meals, and fixed little things like leaky faucets and squeaky doors. He even had a chili recipe he was ridiculously proud of. "You have to try my chili," he'd say. Honestly, it wasn't bad. Mom was happier than she'd been in a long time, and seeing her happy made the situation feel worth it. The kids mostly stayed in their room at first. They were quiet and a little uncomfortable, which made sense. They were suddenly living in someone else's house during a global crisis, with their dad dating their grandmother-aged mom and a 29-year-old guy they barely knew. But they adjusted, or seemed to be making a genuine effort, too. He wasn't just sitting around using my house as a free hotel. He cooked, cleaned, fixed things, and contributed. Mom would sometimes look at me with that expression that basically said, "See? I told you he's a good guy." We also established some basic house rules early on. It was my house, and while I wasn't interested in acting like a dictator, I expected everyone to respect the space, clean up after themselves, and communicate if there was a problem. At the time, none of us could have guessed that eventually I would decide those rules weren't enough, and that I needed some basic order in the house. So we agreed on quiet hours, shared responsibilities, and privacy. Nothing extreme, just simple rules to keep everyone comfortable. R nodded along and mentioned that he had his own rules for his kids. I completely respected that. He was their dad, and it was his right to set boundaries for them. At the time, I assumed that because he understood boundaries with his kids, he'd understand them in my house too. For a while, the arrangement actually felt good. I'd finish work, join everyone for dinner, and we'd talk about everything. Movies, the crazy state of the world, weekend plans, whatever came up. Or would tell stories about places he'd traveled to or jobs he'd had. He was interesting to talk to, and those conversations helped me understand the man my mom had fallen for. I even started thinking that maybe this whole situation could work long-term, but it wasn't perfect. There were little things I initially ignored because I assumed I was simply adjusting to living somewhere new. He'd rearrange the living room because he thought it would make the space flow better. He'd use my tools to fix something and leave them scattered around afterward, promising to clean everything up later, which sometimes meant days later. Annoying, sure, but nothing I couldn't tolerate. Then there was the TV. I'm pretty generous with my stuff, but the living room TV was something I was proud of. It was a newer Ultra HD model, and I didn't mind sharing it, especially during family movie nights. The problem was that R started treating it like his personal TV. He'd sit there for hours channel surfing. If his kids wanted to watch something, he'd tell them what they could and couldn't watch. That started getting under my skin. It was still my house, after all, but I let it go. Why? Because Mom was happy. She laughed more. She joked around. There was a light in her eyes that I hadn't seen in years. So I swallowed my annoyance, convinced myself that everyone was just dealing with a stressful situation, and kept going. Then came the garage incident. I've always been a car guy. My garage is my sanctuary, a place where I work on my car, organize my tools, and unwind. One weekend, I walked in and found her rearranging my tools and moving things around on my workbench. He was casually making space as if he hadn't just started changing my private setup. I appreciate the thought, but I've got a system here, I told him, trying to stay calm. He shrugged, and the dismissive attitude bothered me more than the actual rearranging. Sure thing, he said, but it'd help if things were a little more organized, right? That comment stayed with me. It felt like another small step across a boundary. Looking back, those moments were the beginning of everything that came later. They were tiny encroachments, small tests to see how much he could change or control before I finally pushed back. But at the time, I was still looking at everything through the lens of wanting my mom to be happy. So I ignored the warning signs. For the moment, they were just little red flags in the background. Not serious enough, I thought, to make a big deal out of. Then the weeks became months, and the initial excitement of having R and his kids around slowly disappeared. It wasn't just about the TV, the furniture, or the garage anymore. R's influence was beginning to spread into almost every part of the house. It was like a slow-moving flood, and just like a flood, it was starting to cause damage. One of the first major signs that it was taking over more than his share of the house came from something I least expected: groceries and meals. At first, he'd occasionally help with dinner, and everyone appreciated it. But gradually, he started making all the decisions about what we ate without asking anyone else. Whenever I suggested buying something different, he'd brush me off. No, the kids need to eat healthier. Or, I'm trying to teach them proper eating habits. Sure, that sounded reasonable, but there was one problem. It was still my house and my refrigerator. Then came the rules. What started as normal bedtime and homework rules for his kids slowly turned into household-wide mandates. One morning, I walked into the kitchen and found a schedule posted on the fridge. It included chore assignments for everyone, including me. We need to keep the place tidy, R said, as if I hadn't been keeping my own house clean long before he moved in. And the rules didn't stop with chores. He started telling me how late I should stay up watching TV, because apparently it was disturbing everyone's sleeping schedule. The TV situation got even worse when he started deciding what everyone should watch. Movie nights became his movie nights. If I suggested something else, he'd laugh and say, maybe next time. Except somehow, next time never came. Then there was the privacy issue. I developed this habit of walking into rooms without knocking. My bedroom, which had always been completely off limits, suddenly became part of his casual tour whenever he felt like walking in. Just check and see if you need anything, he'd say, but it didn't feel like that. It felt like he was marking his territory. One time, I caught him standing at my bookshelf, picking up my books and flipping through them like he was browsing in a bookstore. When I raised an eyebrow, he simply said, just curious about what you read. It was unsettling, and before long, his parenting style started spilling over onto me. I wasn't one of his kids, but you wouldn't know that from the way he started talking to me. If I was going out to see friends, he'd give me his opinion. You sure you should be going out with the virus still around? Or make sure you're back at a decent hour. It was like he had completely forgotten who actually owned the house. But the biggest clash came over my home office. I work from home, and I knew that. One afternoon, he knocked on my door and walked in with an idea. I've been thinking, he began. Your office would make a great study room for the kids during the day. You can work in the living room, right? He said it so casually, as if he were doing me a favor by taking away my workspace. I just stared at him, trying to process the audacity. I need this office to work, R. It's specifically set up for my job, which, by the way, pays for this house. I finally answered him, keeping my voice as calm as I could. He looked surprised, but only for a moment. Well, just a thought, he muttered before walking away. But the message was clear. I didn't seem to recognize any real boundary when it came to my house. I tried talking to Mom about it, hoping she'd understand where I was coming from. Unfortunately, that conversation didn't go the way I hoped. He's just trying to help, she said. Or, he's good with the kids. Isn't that what matters? It was frustrating. The more I overstepped, the more Mom seemed to justify his behavior. I couldn't tell whether she genuinely didn't see the problem or whether she was too invested in the relationship to admit that something was wrong. By then, it wasn't just about the office or the TV anymore. It was about respect, authority, and boundaries, three things that were quickly disappearing from my own home. I started retreating more and more. I'd spend extra time in my bedroom or leave the house just to avoid another argument. But I knew it couldn't continue forever. Something had to change. I was getting tired of feeling like a guest in my own house, constantly watching what I said and did so I wouldn't upset a man who had no business acting like he was in charge. As the days passed, everything became more tense. Every comment from her felt like a challenge. Every suggestion sounded like an order. I knew a confrontation was coming. It was only a matter of time before I had to stand up for myself and reclaim my space. The only thing I dreaded was what would happen afterward, especially with Mom caught in the middle. I just didn't realize how soon that confrontation would come. And strangely enough, it started with something as simple as a late-night run. By that point, I was practically walking on eggshells in my own house. It's weird how quickly things can change. One day, you feel like the king of your own castle. The next, you're avoiding landmines in your own living room. Anyway, here's what happened. It was a Thursday night. Nothing unusual. I'd spent the entire day buried in work emails and back-to-back Zoom calls. By the evening, I was restless and needed to clear my head, so I went for a run. Late night runs weren't unusual for me. It was quieter, there were fewer people around, and honestly, running helped me unwind better than anything else. I got back around midnight, sweaty and exhausted, but feeling much more like myself. I quietly headed upstairs, planning to go straight to my room. I didn't want to wake Mom, or the kids. I assumed everyone was asleep. I figured I'd go to bed and deal with everything tomorrow. Except tomorrow came much sooner than I expected. The moment I reached the bottom of the stairs the next morning, I knew something was wrong. The atmosphere felt wrong that morning. It was unusually quiet, even for our normally subdued household. I shrugged it off and headed toward the kitchen, thinking only about getting a cup of coffee. But before I could even reach the coffee pot, the living room door suddenly swung open so hard it nearly came off its hinges. I stood there, red-faced and clearly furious. He didn't waste any time. Get in here. Now. It sounded more like a command than a request. I stopped, my coffee forgotten, trying to figure out what I could possibly have done to make him this angry. My first thought was that something had happened with his kids. Maybe there was an emergency. I stepped into the living room, or slammed the door behind me. The sharp sound echoed through the room, making it obvious this wasn't going to be a calm conversation. Was that really necessary? I asked, more confused than angry. He just glared at me before launching into it. How dare you come into the house at midnight, slamming doors and stomping around? You woke the kids. I was stunned. First, I hadn't slammed any doors. Second, I wasn't a teenager sneaking home after curfew. And third, this man was standing in my house, yelling at me like I was some irresponsible kid. Look, I came in quietly. If I woke anyone up, it wasn't intentional. And it wasn't even that late. Not that late? He interrupted. He stepped closer, pointing a finger directly at my face. In this house, midnight is unacceptable. You will respect the rules while you're under this roof. That was when I finally snapped. The audacity of this guy telling me about rules in my own house was too much. I felt my anger rising fast, and I stepped closer until we were almost face to face. I don't know who you think you are, but you don't get to make rules for me. Not in my house. I kept my voice low and steady, even though I was furious. I'm not one of your kids, Are. You're not my dad. You're just my mom's boyfriend, and that's all you'll ever be. The room went completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. R's face went through several emotions at once. Shock, anger, disbelief. He opened his mouth to respond, closed it, then opened it again. Finally, he found his words. I'm trying to run a respectful house here, he said. But the anger in his voice had faded. If you can't follow simple decency... Decency? I interrupted. I threw his own word right back at him. You think it's decent to walk into my home and start laying down rules like you own the place? You think that's respectful to me? To my home? He had no answer. The room suddenly felt much smaller. The air was heavy with all the resentment and frustration that had been building for months. Then my mom appeared in the hallway, clearly drawn in by the shouting. Her face was filled with worry and confusion. What's going on here? She asked, looking for me to R and then back at me. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself enough to explain what had happened. But before I could say anything, R jumped in. Your son is completely out of control. He's disrespectful, and he refuses to follow any rules. This is my house, sir. I cut him off, turning toward Mom. I've been trying to accommodate everyone. I've tried to be reasonable through all of this, but I can't keep doing it while he thinks he has the right to run my life. Mom looked back and forth between us, biting her lip the way she always did when she was trying to figure out how to fix a mess. Maybe we should all sit down and talk about this, she suggested. She was trying to play peacemaker, but I was past that point. No, Mom, not this time. This isn't something we can fix with another conversation. He needs to leave. Today. Maybe it was too harsh. Maybe it was too sudden. But I'd said it. And once those words were out, everything changed. The lines had been drawn, and there was no going back. Not after everything that had happened. After the blowout with R, the house felt like a war zone that had suddenly gone silent. It was the kind of silence that felt heavy, like everyone was waiting for another storm. R and his kids stayed upstairs. I stayed in my room. Mom was caught in the middle, torn between her son and her boyfriend, a position nobody wants to be in. The fallout was immediate. R avoided me, which honestly was fine by me. But Mom's reaction hurt the most. She started giving me the silent treatment, something she hadn't done since I was a teenager. It was obvious she was upset about what had happened. You didn't have to kick him out, she eventually said, her voice quiet and hurt. He was just trying to help in his own way. I tried explaining my side. I told her that what are called help felt more like a takeover. He had slowly taken away my privacy, crossed my boundaries, and started acting like he had authority over me in my own home. But it felt like talking to a brick wall. Mom saw everything through the lens of her relationship. She was hopeful and in love, and it seemed like no amount of reality could change the picture she had created in her mind. Meanwhile, R's presence in the house became even more uncomfortable. Technically, he was still living there, but we had become strangers passing each other in a house that suddenly felt far too small. His kids were caught in the middle, and they looked more confused and sad than anything else. I felt bad for them. They hadn't asked for any of this. A couple of days after the argument, I came downstairs for breakfast and found her sitting at the kitchen table. He looked like he hadn't slept. His kids were there too, quietly picking at their food. The atmosphere was tense. I grabbed a coffee and sat down, planning to keep to myself. Then R cleared his throat. He looked like he was preparing himself to say something. I'm going to find a new place, he finally said without looking at me. It's clear I've overstayed my welcome. His voice had lost all its usual force. He just sounded tired and defeated. I nodded. I felt a strange mix of relief and awkwardness. Thanks. I think that's for the best. His kids looked up, and I could see the worry on their faces. That was when it really hit me. Their stability was being uprooted all over again. I felt a pang of guilt, but I also knew this situation couldn't continue. Not like this. The next few days dragged by. Every day was a quiet reminder of the tension hanging over the house. R started packing slowly at first, then more urgently once he found a new place. Mom barely said anything during those days. Her disappointment was obvious, and I could feel it hanging in the air. But as moving day got closer, she started opening up a little. Maybe she was finally realizing that, painful as it was, this was something that needed to happen. When R finally moved out, everything was surprisingly businesslike. There were no emotional goodbyes or last-minute requests to stay. Just box after box being carried out to a rental van. Before leaving, his kids hugged Mom. It was a quiet goodbye, with an unspoken promise to stay in touch. R shook my hand. I couldn't tell if it was a gesture of peace, an apology, or simply closure. Once R and his kids were gone, the house felt strangely empty. It was bigger somehow. For the next few days, Mom and I were stuck in a quiet standoff. She was hurt, and I knew it. I tried to break the tension by suggesting a movie night or dinner together, but she remained distant. I knew it was going to take time. During those quiet days, I thought a lot about how everything had gone so wrong. I wondered if there was something I could have done differently, some way I could have prevented the whole fallout. But every time I replayed those conversations in my head, I kept coming back to the same conclusion. After replaying all those confrontations in my head, I kept coming back to the same conclusion. I had to stand up for myself and protect my space. Could I have handled things more diplomatically? Probably. But at the end of the day, it was my home, and I couldn't keep living in it like a stranger. It took a few weeks, but Mom slowly started coming around. We began talking more, not just about what had happened, but about normal things again. Work, life, books we'd been reading, random things that had nothing to do with our. It felt like we were rebuilding our relationship one conversation at a time. One evening, we were sitting together on the back porch when Mom finally brought everything up. "I'm sorry," she said, staring out at the garden. "I should have listened to you more. I got caught up in, I don't know, I guess I got caught up in how badly I wanted things to work." I reached over and squeezed her hand. "It's okay, Mom. I understand. You wanted to be happy, and you thought it was part of that." She nodded, tears starting to fill her eyes. "I did, but I forgot that your happiness matters too. I won't make that mistake again." We sat there quietly for a while, watching the sunset. For the first time in weeks, the weight of everything that had happened seemed to be lifting. It wasn't a perfect resolution. There were still things we needed to work through, and some wounds that hadn't completely healed. But it felt like a beginning towards something better, something we could both live with. After I moved out, the house slowly started feeling normal again. Or at least as normal as it could be after everything we'd been through. The air felt lighter. There was still some tension between Mom and me, but every day seemed to chip away at the wall that had formed during our time there. Mom also started becoming more like her old self, the woman I remembered before all this mess. She started tackling projects around the house that she'd been putting off for months. She repainted the guest room, worked on the backyard garden, and even started planning some DIY decorating projects. It was good to see her taking an interest in the house again, not just as a place she happened to be staying because of difficult circumstances, but as a home. We started having more honest conversations, usually over dinner or while watching TV in the evenings. It wasn't easy at first. There were still plenty of things we hadn't said out loud, but we both made an effort. One night, while we were clearing the dishes, Mom suddenly stopped and looked at me seriously. "I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened," she said, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "I know I put you in a difficult position with R, and I didn't see things clearly." I put down the plate I was drying and leaned against the counter. "I know, Mom. Things got pretty rough there for a while." She nodded, swallowing hard. "I let my feelings for him blind me to what he was doing to you, to us. It's not an excuse, but I wanted the relationship to work so badly that I ignored the warning signs." Hearing her finally acknowledge the strain I had put on our relationship felt like a turning point. "It means a lot hearing you say that," I told her. "I just wanted you to be happy, but not at the cost of our home feeling like a battleground." She reached over and squeezed my arm. "I've made an appointment with a therapist," she said quietly. "I think it's time I sorted some things out and figured out why I let all of this happen." That was a big step for her. Mom had always been the kind of person who believed she could handle everything on her own. Seeing her take a step toward healing and taking care of herself was a huge relief. "You smiled here. We'll get through this, Mom. Together. And I'm here too," I said. For the first time in weeks, I saw a genuine smile spread across Mom's face. The next few weeks were a period of adjustment. With R and his kids gone, the house sometimes felt strangely quiet. But it was a peaceful kind of quiet, the kind that lets you breathe and think without constantly feeling like you're walking on eggshells. Mom and I took the opportunity to redefine how we would live together. We talked about boundaries, expectations, privacy, and what each of us needed to feel comfortable. It wasn't just my house anymore. It was our home, and we both deserved to feel safe and respected in it. One afternoon, I came home and found Mom sitting in the living room surrounded by photo albums and old family videos. She waved me over with a nostalgic smile. "Come here. Take a look at this," she said, patting the sofa beside her. We spent hours going through old pictures, laughing at childhood memories and telling stories about the past. It was the most connected I'd felt to her in a long time. It felt like we were rebuilding our relationship from the ground up, finding our way back to each other after circumstances, and ours influence had pulled us apart. As we turned the pages, I realized just how much history we shared. We'd been through so many ups and downs together. This was simply another chapter in our story. And now, we were closing that chapter together. I'm really sorry for everything, Mom said as we closed the last album. But I'm here now, fully. No more distractions. I appreciate that, Mom. And I'm here too, I replied, squeezing her hand. We had both learned a lot from everything that happened. The importance of communication, setting boundaries, and supporting each other without conditions. In the end, the resolution wasn't simply about our leaving or getting our old lives back. It was about understanding and respecting each other's needs and personal space. It was about growing from the experience instead of simply trying to forget it. Life moved on. Mom continued therapy, and I returned to my normal routine with work and friends. The house finally felt like mine again. But more importantly, it felt like ours. Mine and Mom's. We were a team, and whatever came next, I knew we would handle it together, with open hearts and a clear understanding of what made our home a safe place for both of us. So yeah, it was a rough chapter. But like most difficult experiences, it taught us lessons worth learning. And as for Mom and me, we weren't just okay. We were stronger, closer, and more in tune with each other than we've been in years. Here's to new beginnings. ###asterisco. Do you know the house was yours? Yes. I was completely upfront about that from the beginning. When I moved in, he actually asked me about rent and other expenses. But I'm fortunate enough to have a good income and could easily cover the household costs, so I didn't charge him anything. The understanding was that they would only stay temporarily until the global situation improved. 2. Were you planning to kick your mom out too? No, absolutely not. My mom wasn't the problem. She needed to work through some things, not find new address. That's why she decided to continue therapy. 3. How long had Mom and her been together? They had been casually dating for almost a year, but things became serious around the beginning of lockdown. Since their relationship was becoming more serious, Mom suggested that we all stay together during lockdown so everyone could get to know each other better. 4. What happened with your parents' marriage? For those who were curious, my dad was controlling and manipulative. He was very good at hiding it, just like he hid the fact that he treated his girlfriends badly. There weren't dramatic fights or a messy divorce. He was my dad, and I didn't fully understand what was happening when I was younger. Looking back, though, I can see things much more clearly now. Oh, care, but he played away with the wrong woman and paid the ultimate price on her car bonnet. It's sad, but I can't be angry about it.